17.
How long have you been 17?
A while.
Now, as much as I'd like to pretend it never happened, I, unlike Edward, haven't been 17 for a while, and while I don't remember much about what I was actually doing back then, aside from, graduating and being thrown into the unknown, I most definitely remember what being 17 felt like. Intense, awkward, and very cringe. Twilight has been criticized and parodied ever since the first movie came out back in 2008. And yeah, to some extent, I too would agree that the saga does have its fair share of cringeworthy scenes and lines, but I mean, come on. If there is one thing adolescence has to be defined by, it is awkwardness. Being a teenager sucks. You're no longer a child, but you're not an adult just yet either. Your hormones are all over the place, your body hasn't stopped doing weird shit ever since you've hit puberty, and as much as we like to make fun of Twilight's dialogue, I would argue that it is actually pretty on point when it comes to teenage interactions. I mean, take a look at this, and tell me this isn't peak high school exchange.
That's so funny.
Go on. Young poet Rimbaud once famously wrote, "No one serious at 17. And no, we're not. Hell, we are downright stupid at times, and in the end, maybe this is partly why Twilight has been deemed such an insufferable piece of media by so many people, because aside from the vampires, this is exactly how we used to be.
I mean, you don't even say hi to me.
Hi.
Clumsy and dramatic and self-conscious and nervous all the time, and maybe it just hurts too damn much to have such an unglamorized version of our past self thrown right back into our faces. And yeah, while half of the global population came together to hate on Twilight back in 2012, maybe one should take a good, hard look at their past class photos and Facebook albums before they keep on talking. Yeah, that stinks. But that's... I personally remember being embarrassed by any and everything. Not being able to communicate, being uncomfortable in the most mundane situations, and I remember being an edgy-ass kid who swore no one could possibly understand what I was going through when, yeah, spoiler alert baby, that's just part of the delightful experience of being a teenager. All of that angst did not make me any more special than the next gal, it just meant I, just like everybody else, was a kid living childhood once and for all with no understanding of what life was going to be from this point onwards. Therefore, it is most definitely not a surprise that Summit Entertainment was dead set of choosing director Catherine Hardwicke, who at the time was mostly known for her extreme portrayal of adolescence in her other teen movie 13, to adapt Twilight to the screen. Although she initially refused like 5 times or so, she actually got convinced to take on the job after she read Mayer's novel and saw how intense and excessive it was. So yeah, the vampire figure thus became a metaphor to depict how voracious and organic first love and desires are. The conscious exacerbation the story keeps on answering to with the blue tint and the ridiculous stunts translates nothing else but the rather large scope of turmoils one going through puberty inevitably feels. Now, of all the quirks Twilight has been relentlessly made fun of for, Kristen Stewart's portrayal of a lip-biting, stuttering and head-shaking Isabella Swan has to be one of the first that comes to mind. Many people criticized Stewart's acting in the Twilight movies as if the girl hadn't already acted in 17 movies prior and showed how competent of an actress she actually is. I'm still haunted by Speak, the movie. I highly recommend it, by the way. But yeah, now that I've revisited the movie as an adult, I don't feel like her performance was some testimony of how bad of an actress she was, but rather how Stewart went all in, embodying a clumsy and socially anxious and introverted character. And to be completely honest, she did a hell of a good job portraying Bella the way Bella was written. And you know what? I will say it. Defunding the first Twilight movie might be a hill I'd be willing to die on, but I will not pretend it is perfect either. Yes, Bella Swan is a bland character. She is. But to me, that's okay. I know the greatest sin a fictional character can ever commit is to be boring. Countless examples of maniacs with awful morals being thirsted over just because they were well written enough. But to be fair, I don't mind having a character leaning on the dull side when it serves a purpose, and to me, Twilight happens to fall right into that category. In her analysis, A Chiaroscuro Review, French researcher Alice Bria-Haquet rightfully observes, Bella remains profoundly attached to the good girl archetype and fully plays into the Cinderella complex. This is undoubtedly what is the most criticized about the saga, and its detractor emphasize how her passive attitude no longer fits the new and more energetic female role models such as Hermione Granger or Katniss Everdeen. In reality, this is quite the confusion of genres when it comes to Twilight. Bella is not a bit-lit character, but a romance novel character, and more specifically, paranormal romance. The Twilight saga, at least in its first 3 novels, follows the logic of a romance novel, following the protagonist from love at first sight to her wedding, focusing the narration stakes more so upon the couple's success rather than her personality. See the books, although written in the first-person narrative, intentionally does not make Bella into a very complex character. I believe, to some extent, Meyer wrote Bella as a very one-dimensional character to ease the young reader's empathy and identification processes. After all, it is so much easier to project oneself into someone else's shoes if said shoes are not too specific in style and size. Now, yeah, maybe Meyer was just not that good of an author, which I tend to believe as well. But she might just as well have been able to create some sort of one-size-fits-all type of character that is easy to read and understand. Bella doesn't have much personality aside from being
unconditionally and irrevocably in love with him.
But were we better back then, when we were teenagers in love? I don't think so. I have vivid memories of conversations with my girlfriends at the time solely revolving around one another's love interests, because teenage love is weird, okay, and obsessive and all-consuming, so I suppose it is time we cut Bella Swan some slack. She's a straight white girl, she fell in love for the first time with a straight white dude, and yeah, she's a little boring and hashtag not like other girls, and everybody seems to like her for no reason aside from, I don't know, being fresh meat. But, I mean, is it really that big of a problem? I don't think so. We'll talk more extensively about Edward and Bella's relationship in a minute. But before that, I would like to talk about Robert Pattinson's portrayal of the character first. Because while Pattinson certainly did not have to undergo as much negative critics as his co-star did, because that's just the beauty of double standards, the actor actually still had to face quite a few grievances. While he is now mostly known for his deep hatred of the franchise, there was once a time Pattinson was actually thrilled to portray such a weird character as Edward Cullen. It is public knowledge that Pattinson, as an actor and most likely as a person as well, has a thing for nutjobs and weirdos, and once you shed the franchise of the $1 million romance-focused marketing, Twilight is a fairly weird story, and Edward is a fairly strange character as well, much more complex than the movie gives him credit for. He is very much not the perfect supernatural lover teams of market analysts and producers and executives made him out to be. God, no. Edward Cullen is a brooding, self-loathing, socially anxious, centenary apex predator who would be relentlessly killing people off if it weren't for his good old Christian's beliefs. So yeah, he isn't supposed to be the main character of a romantic odyssey, he's supposed to be and feel dangerous and otherworldly and unsettling. Which is why, I suppose, Pattinson felt drawn to the character in the first place, and also why he almost got fired from the franchise.
I think playing a vampire, you gotta really come in there with some sort of game. And the word on Twilight was, like, you took it so seriously when you got that part that you almost got kicked off that set.
I mean, I just thought, considering now that Twilight's known to be this sort of very emo thing, I mean, I always just kind of thought at the time, it's like 21, if you're going into a relationship with someone, the way to make it really intense is if like you can barely talk to each other, you can barely touch each other, and it's incredibly serious all the time. I mean, it's kind of like what teenage relationships are like, and that's what sort of makes it feel like that. But everyone kind of wanted it to be like, no, they should just be like happy and having fun. That's what people want, and that's kind of that's the sort of teen romance thing.
You wanted it brooding a little bit.
Yeah, I wanted. And now that the whole series is known as like a brooding thing, but
right. Your agents put pressure on you and stuff to say, hey, you better just get with the program or they're going to fire you.
Oh yeah. They flew up and said, like, you've got to, because I thought I was pretty safe. Like,
right.
And they flew up and they're like, yeah, you have to do the opposite of what you're doing now or you're going to get fired today.
So how did you hold your ground? I mean, how did you know what to do?
I didn't. I literally, I came back after lunch. I was like, hi!
Let's be honest, Stephanie Meyer definitely did not write a Nosferatu novel. While Edward is by nature a vampire, he is also meant to be Bella's romantic interest. There is no denying that Twilight was primarily written as a love story. But as I've previously stated, Edward's romantic lead status wasn't meant to take anything from the character's depth. If anything, it fuels it. As French author Camille Aurel and Catherine Hermakoff wrote, surely Edward would have never existed without Mayer's ability and casual use of the vampiric figure as a means to retain the necessary traits to fit her design. Strange aura of the immortal, the magnetic charisma led by pale skin and color-changing translucent eyes. A figure which she eagerly gets rid of its evilness through the portrayal of bloodlust as an evil perversion the characters must suffer through and fight against. As she pictures her hero belonging to a family of nice and civilized vampires with impeccable morals, as they only drink the blood of animals, who choose to live peacefully amongst humans, Meyer got herself the best combination to shape a character meant to assume a remarkable number of faces, facets, and seductions. Edward is simultaneously a supernatural creature who's supposed to feed on human blood but chooses not to, and a centenarian teenager stuck in time, doomed to be and feel 17 forever. Can you believe the horror of that? Because Stephanie Meyer was pretty clear when she explained that being turned into a vampire meant one stops aging both physically and mentally. So yeah, no wonder Edward feels everything so intensely, no wonder he wears his existential dread on his sleeve to the point of absurdity. In this regard, I actually firmly believe that Pattinson's initial portrayal of the character as someone literally oozing self-hatred and misery from every single pore of his shiny skin made much more sense than anything else the producers pushed him to do afterwards, meaning playing a sexy and smiling dead guy. Pattinson's interpretation might have been a little intense at times, but Edward is an intense guy after all. That's the whole point. In the end, marketing strategies and the need for mainstream content is, to me at least, solely responsible for Edward's mischaracterization. By choosing to exclusively focus the plot on the romantic storyline while trying to keep all of the weird things that he does to Bella and actually make it part of the romance was such a bad call that I'm surprised it did not kill the franchise before New Moon was even greenlit. So, Twilight is not plot-driven. We'll start there. I'm not here to pretend the books deserved a writing prize, nor the movies an award. There is no pretending Twilight is a great story or that the plot was amazing, and there is truly no pretending Twilight is some sort of undervalued masterpiece. No. But Twilight is, like many teen dramas, emotionally driven. It doesn't make it a bad piece of media per se. It doesn't mean we as an audience should frown upon its narrative because it isn't constructed like, say, a Christopher Nolan movie.
A story that runs parallel to his life, but it's the story of another character.
It means you're not going into Twilight expecting to get your mind blown by how clever of a film it is, because that's not the point, and that's not gonna happen. Twilight is, or at least the first movies made it out to be, a cheesy and somewhat gory-ish romance flick starring two 17-year-olds discovering falling in love for the first time. And yeah, while fairly blunt, the book did a pretty decent job describing the emotional turmoils that first love entails. And while you can't exactly direct a movie from one character's point of view only, Hardwick did feel the need to translate the intensity of such a formative first experience to the screen. So you can forget about the butterflies in the stomach metaphor because teenage love feels like a hurricane. The character and the story and the acting, it all tends to get over-dramatic more often than not, but teenagers are dramatic. And that's okay. Now, usually, most of what makes a plot move forward comes from external conflicts. Character A and character B are perfect for each other but cannot be together for some reason. Take Romeo and Juliet, for instance. They can't be together because of their respective family feuds. Jack and Ennis can't be together because of the violent homophobia plaguing society. Jack and Rose can't be together because of their respective social classes. Carol and Therese can't be together because Carol might lose her parental rights to her daughter because society was just that fun back then. Dean and Castiel can't be together because that's the CW. The Doctor and Rose can't be together because, yeah, actually we don't talk about that one. Now what happens with Twilight is that the main conflict does not come from external factors but rather internal ones. Although Edward eventually falls in love with Bella because otherwise it would be a very different movie. He initially desires her not for who she is as a person, but for her blood. In Midnight Sun, the long-awaited retelling of the saga's first book from Edward's perspective, there is a whole chapter dedicated to Edward's planning on murdering every single person in the room when he first meets Bella, just so he can have a little sip of it. Ain't that just romantic, ladies? Nothing claiming true love like a good mass murder, am I right? With this piece of information in mind, I too would agree with Edward that his very existence is somewhat threatening to Bella's life. What interferes with Edward and Bella's relationship isn't so much the fact that he's a vampire and that she's human, because after all, Edward does coexist with humans on a daily basis without feeling the urge to go completely apeshit. What actually comes in the way is that Edward does not and cannot trust himself in the presence of Bella, specifically because her very scent is irresistible to him.
I've never wanted a human's blood so much in my life.
I trust you.
Don't.
Twilight is rather plotless, not because it holds no story, rather because said story revolves around emotionality and desire instead of action. What moves the plot forward isn't what the characters do, but what they feel and what they want. Something that is actually pretty tangible in the books, but even more so in the first film, because being such a big fan of the source material, Hardwick felt it was more important to convey the irresistible push and pull between the main characters than, mindlessly entertain the audience. She once wrote in her notebooks, "My challenge was to translate this to film, how to make Stephanie Meyer's powerful emotions, delirious, obsessive, hypnotic, profound love, and put that on screen. Make you feel what she makes you feel when you read her words, when you let yourself get swiped away with Bella and Edward." Emotions are not just displayed in that movie, they're heightened, sharpened. As French author and scriptwriter Sophia Colley wrote, "This is what teen movies only rely on, finding forms and range of epiphanic emotion to precede their metamorphosis, which makes them a little dear, noble even, devoted to their quest of the infinitely sensitive. The world turns into effusive material, everything gets overturned and inflated with affection." Every single shot of the first Twilight movie oozes with emotion. The movie gushes with desire and self-restraint, sensuality and despair, and this is why the plot isn't and never was about star-crossed lovers defying the universe, but a story about characters facing their own fears before they can get a taste of what they truly want. In the end, this is why the first installment of the saga should have also been the last. Twilight should have never been a saga, actually, because what makes the first book/movie so special and dear to me revolves solely around seeing characters learning how to let go and surrender themselves to their profound yearning for each other. All conflicts just get resolved once Edward gives into his love for Bella in the movie's last scene. And it was a good ending. It was bittersweet, and those are the best. All in all, Twilight is a movie about hunger. Hunger for love, for blood, for the body. A hunger which can only ever be satiated by consuming and being consumed by the other. As aforementioned Sophia Colley puts it, teenagehood fascinates as it is the catalyst of a transformation. A new pulsion arises and the world is shattered. Teen movies account for that eternal rebirth, the awakening of a life force to itself. Teenagers are butterflies. Through some sort of temporal cocoon, pulsion, desire, and the emotion emerging from realizing one's own being to the world have to find some form of uprising. How do we accept so herself in an interview with Yahoo Entertainment?
I was trying to feel what Bella felt every minute of that movie.
It is because of that desire. The spectator gets such a massive amount of, close-ups and longing gazes between the main characters, starving for one another. Edward, on one hand, is rediscovering a thirst he thought to be long forgotten or at least controlled. It is not for nothing that his eyes turn black when he gets hungry and needs to feed, because admittedly it's bloodlust, but it's not just any blood, it's Bella's. Edward wants Bella the way he has never wanted anybody else, ever. And the dude has lived a fairly long life. And on the other hand, you have Bella, who is experiencing sexual desire for the very first time. She bites her lips, she shivers, she starts changing the way she dresses as the story goes to appear more, feminine and appealing. Actually, Kristen's way of conveying want and longing was the reason why she and eventually Pattinson got cast in the first place.
I had already seen Kristen in Into the Wild, and she's sitting in that trailer and she just wants him, she just wants to make out with him so bad. And I thought, oh, I love that longing that this actress is able to convey. And so when I met Kristen, went to Pittsburgh and we ran around in the park and played and improvised a ton of scenes, I thought she's going to be great at this. Now I had to find the match. And so I looked at tons of guys, and a lot of them were like really cute, like they could look like the super cute guy at your high school, but they didn't look otherworldly, like they'd been around for 100 years. And then Rob kind of came up. I was talking to him on the phone, and I'm like, well, I think you're going to have to come out. I need to see if there's chemistry. And then I picked my top 4 guys that I thought might be Edward, and they all came over to my house with Kristen, and she had like an hour and a half with each guy. Yeah. She had to kiss him, and we had to do improvs and run around and do all kind of crazy fun stuff and just see who she really could click with. And at the end she goes, it's gotta be Rob.
Both their presences overwhelms the other in a completely different way, but in the end, lust is lust. In such regard, Edward and Bella's first kissing scene is particularly telling. Hardwick wanted to make Edward's internal conflict as visual and gripping as possible. She conveys how unnatural his physical strength is, how inhuman he can get. When Bella's scent becomes too strong for him to resist, he literally yanks himself away from her. And yeah, granted, that scene is a little comical to watch now, but it also translates how unsafe his pulsions are, how deep his yearning for Bella actually is. And that is what is so enjoyable about the first movie. It's less of a Hollywoodization of the book than a low-budget, indie-like movie with a blue tint and Dutch angles and a dash of female gaze, and most importantly, a deep appreciation for the source material from cast and crew alike. Since I've chosen to profess my love for the first movie out of my own free will, I suppose I also have to address the elephant in the room. As the years went by, plethora of viewers noticed how Twilight displayed one too many outdated values and allegedly glamorized abusive relationships. In her article, The Twilight of Sexual Liberation, cultural historian Carol Siegel wrote, "The Twilight series does far more than urge abstinence. It conveys damaging ideas to vulnerable young people. Among the alarming messages the series gives young people are, men save women and give them immortality through forcing obedience. Intergenerational marriages between teen girls and mature men are best. Men are naturally sexually violent towards women. Women enjoy being violently sexually dominated by the men they love within the sanctity of marriage. But true fulfillment for women can only ever come through maternity within marriage." Let's be fair for a hot second. The idea Twilight may convey some problematic ideologies is a completely valid concern. After all, Edward does complain about how strongly he has to refrain himself from hurting the woman that he loves, a desire so profound that Bella actually mistakes it for hatred in the first place. In the novel, for instance, she says, "He stared at me again, meeting my eyes with the strangest expression on his face. It was hostile, furious. I picked up at him one more time and regretted it. He was glaring down at me, his black eyes full of revulsion. As I flinched away from him, shrinking against my chair, the phrase 'if looks could kill' suddenly ran through my mind." So obviously that does not sound like the beginning of a fairy tale kind of love story, and neither does it get better as the two characters start spending more time together, actually. In fact, Edward keeps stating how much of a threat he actually is to Bella, so much so that in the novel he point blank tells her, "I don't know how to be close to you. I don't know if I can." However, and I want you all to listen to me very, very carefully on this, okay? Because I don't want to spoil anything to you guys, but he's a vampire.
What's my venom?
He's a vampire, for crying out loud. No matter how much love and affection he ends up feeling for Bella as the movie goes on, his first instinct are those of a hunter, because once again, that's what he is. Of course, one of the main issues for a character whose main characteristics are supposed to be bloodlust and frustration will want to drink blood from someone smelling like a Big Mac. You can't criticize Twilight and its depiction of vampires with no fangs, a vegetarian diet and shiny skin if you can't stomach the fact that vampires will sometimes want to take a little sip of hemoglobin.
Oh god.
Although a handful of Mayer's own value did make their way into Melissa Rosenberg's final script, and while it's important to look at the movie and its source material with a critical eye, let's just not use that as a way to vilify the whole franchise now, shall we? Let's leave that energy back in 2012, right where it belongs. Now, I'm not saying that Edward and Bella's relationship is all good and nice and perfect. Hell, no. Okay, those two do in fact display quite a lot of red flags, but once again, no one, not even Stephanie Meyer herself, who doesn't always have the best views on the world, never claimed that Edward was some misunderstood Prince Charming and that his relationship with Bella should be something to be looking forward to. What I'm trying to say here is, maybe it is time people start consuming media in a critical yet nuanced way, okay? Because I cannot stress this enough in this day and age, but kids, you can in fact like something and be critical of it. I know. Shocker, right? I everybody loves hating on Twilight because it's just that cool to hate it. And the thing is, yeah, the dialogues are bothersome. Yes, Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson's acting are definitely over the top. Yes, some sequences are just too cringeworthy for their own good. But I would argue that this is just part of the ethos of being a teenager. Sure, Twilight has its problem, like every single piece of media out there. I'm not saying the movie nor the saga has no flaws.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No!
But is it that bad, truly? In a world where the human centipede exists? Or is it just too damn tempting to hate on basically anything teenage girls imprint on? Obviously, there is no point trying to defend the whole saga.
No! No! No!
But despite its largely unknown cast at the time, its low budget, Hardwick's indie signature, that first movie managed to make millions at the box office. Whether angry old dudes like it or not, the success of the first Twilight does not come from nowhere, and further implies a vast majority of its initial audience managed to see themselves within this imperfect, yet unconditional love story. So yes, Twilight is cringe, but everybody was, you included.